All right, guys, welcome back to Larry Buys Houses. We're going through the Money People Deal series. This week, we're on chapter 18, the luxury of no options. And I've been on both sides of the luxury of no options, both the side of stepping, trying to maintain two things on the option side and still having some success. And then on the other side, where we're investing in fully and getting the result and what those differences are. So in chapter 18, Stefan's telling the story of him going through this construction thing, the no options. He had to finish this project or go bankrupt. And it tells a story near the end of it. But what I took away mostly from this chapter was there's kind of three positions for the luxury of no options. And so the first one is the luxury of no options and what options actually do. So like having no options versus the deceptive nature of feeling like there are options and that having options is what you want. But what ends up happening, as you see here, is that that actually kind of stalls you from fully going in on things. And then the second thing is like, okay, let's look at people who've had no options, and we look through the middle here and what you get from, as Julius Caesar in the story here, burning the boats, what you get from burning the boats. And then the third thing that comes from actually committing to the no options. So what can it be achieved by the luxury of no options, but then what you actually get personally when you get into the mindset of no other option than what you're doing. Okay. So a couple of early quotes. So one, we're going to talk about options themselves. So it says here, focus brings clarity to the mind. Focus brings success. Focus brings happiness. However, the enemy of focus is options. Have you ever noticed that some of the least happy people are the ones with the most options? So it talks here about very rich people and how they have, maybe they had no options to get there, but once they get there, they have so many options that they end up, wasting their time, drugs and alcohol and that sort of thing. So it talks about how you get into a point or having too many options is actually a distraction. So distraction being the opposite of focus. And so, you can be in it goes through a couple here. So what if I had gone the other direction? Or what if I had chosen differently? Or what if I dated the other girl or things along that lines? And these what ifs with no commitment or focus on any one thing. So, you know, there's a quote that Elon Musk they were talking about the Trump presidency, and um, he's like, I don't play to lose. So people are like, you really, backed him heavily and went into that. And he said, yeah, I play to win. The downside to losing is that you lost, but to be half into something isn't worth being in at all. So everything that he does, Tesla, boring, he goes all the way with it. And you can see the result that Elon Musk is able to achieve because of the luxury of no options. He doesn't give himself the option of failure. Yeah, things fail, but the mission is not a failure. Rockets may crash, things might explode, cars might crash, but the mission continues. That's not the mission at hand. So the option to quit because things are hard is never really on his table. And so having that focus allows you to really have no option in how you're operating. You're not thinking, I'm half in, I'm playing both red and black at the roulette table. Like you're not in a split. And so we're going to spend a lot of time on the third thing, but the second one, which is what, okay, so let's say that what can we expect when we cut out the other options and the distractions? Well, we're going to get that focus. And the examples it has here is Caesar landed on the shores of Britain to wage war and burn the boats. So they had no option but victory, and they were victorious. Um, it's kind of like fighting with your back against the wall. You have no other option but to fight your way through it. And then Spartan warriors had the death before dishonor. So they would rather die than lose and be dishonored in combat. And so because of that mindset that they're cultivating, they really had the luxury of no options in how they were fighting on the battlefield. They're not like, oh, well, if this battle doesn't work out, I'm gonna go and back to my day job or whatever. No, this was death or victory. And then so if we look at some of the most successful business people, the common element is they find themselves in a no option situation early in life. So things like um, parents who are either dead or incompetent, so they had to like maybe mature faster or take over the family business at a young age, like Donald Trump's father. And then there's the rich dad, poor dad story. So these are all examples of, this situation in life that creates a no options for them and that they have to find their way through that, specifically at a young age. And so that it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're at you have to be at a young age, but um, it really does come down to that luxury of no options and making that commitment. So we move on a little bit further here, and it's talking about Dave Grohl, Trey Cool. They both dropped out of university to pursue music, and so it says here that's like a one-way street, dropping out when you're 16 or whatever. But I would argue that it was a commitment that they made, that they were like, okay, this music thing is what I want, and I'm going to go after it. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And they've mentally cut off going to school and doing that sort of thing. And, you could always go back. You could always go back to school or whatever, but that wasn't in their mindset. They were dead set on becoming a musician. Then you look at the other ones like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. These are people that believed so much in what they're doing that that was the path. They got on it and they took it and they went with it. They weren't having a plan B. Well, if Facebook doesn't work out, I'll go be a lawyer. Or if, making computers doesn't work out, I'll go do something else. No, they were just dead set on what they were doing because they had that focus as they didn't eliminated the other options of what it is they would be doing. So we go on here now. The third part, this is where you actually burn the boats. So the luxury of no options has a burning of the boats style activity. So for instance, quitting your corporate job, where Stefan's talking about quitting his corporate job because he realized the time he's giving to the corporate job and his bankruptcy on this project that he's working on, that he had 90 days to sort that out. And within those 90 days, if he kept working, he would go bankrupt for sure. The plan was that he had to quit spending the time and entirely focus on getting that thing over the line because either way, it was bankrupt, death, or dishonor, right? It was um death over dishonor. So he either going to go bankrupt doing what it was instead of just like, oh, I've got my corporate job and I can put this out another 90 days. We'll see what 90 days. No, he strapped it on and took it onto himself there and um went to work on it, driving materials to the job site, going there, working until he couldn't work anymore, painting the thing himself. And obviously that's something that maybe not everyone could do. But I think there's a certain amount of navigating because it says later in the chapter that people are always trying to find the smooth transition into, say, real estate investing or something like bigger or worthwhile. And it doesn't seem like that smooth transition, really works for a lot of people that I've coached or people that he's coached or worked with. Um, it always ends up being that the security holds them back from the freedom. And Robert Kiyosaki says it here. He says, you can only choose one of the two things, either security or freedom. And when you pick security, you get maximum security, you get the maximum security prison. That's the most secure you can be, locked in a room away from everyone. No one can get you. And then freedom on the entrepreneurial side, this is where freedom, you get maximum freedom. So there's really no safety nets there to back you up. You're right out there on the edge working for yourself. And so for people who find themselves in the luxury of no options, they only have one choice, that freedom at all costs and security they once had has been obliterated. There is the only chance for survival. Freedom is the only choice for these people that pursue it with a life or death vigor that is infectious and absolutely unstoppable. So when you look at that, you say, okay, we've got, we come to the realization here that options is the enemy of focus. So not entertaining those thoughts and burning the bridges on those thoughts even. You know, any option that comes up that isn't on your vision plan, isn't on your mission plan, just don't entertain them. You know, oh, I should have dated the other girl. Don't entertain that. Shouldn't have quit my job. Don't entertain those thoughts. You know, just continue on because that's the burning of the boats at that mindset level. Because obviously we don't really have boats to burn here, and we can always go find another job that is equal to the job that maybe we already have now. But what we get is that really purposeful existence that allows you to do these unhuman like things with this motivated dedication. And what you'll find is that when you're on a mission like that and you're set yourself up with no options and you're looking for people to help, people will help you because they can see that you're dedicated to what it is that you're doing. If you're asking for people's help and you're like half in or half out of something, it's kind of like investing. You know, people are only going to invest with people that bring a high level of confidence and security. So you're like, oh, I'm gonna maybe, you know, do this real estate wholesaling thing or get into the sales job. And it's like full time. You're like, well, I'm just gonna start a part time and get started. And it's like, okay, really part time, like 20 hours a week or like 4 hours a week. So when you look at that, just the amount of time, and I say this time and time again, the amount of time that we are willing to give to somebody else, but we won't go to work for ourselves is always really staggering to me. So going to work and really setting that schedule and going to work for yourself. And people try to get into these things where they're working less now that they're working for themselves. And maybe, but at that point, you realize that you can triple or quadruple what you're doing, hit that 40-hour mark and really see your entrepreneurial stuff take off. It's really like Andrew Tate says, if you try your hardest, you can't fail. And the luxury of no options is an example of that. If failing is not an option for you, then you're going to be pretty hard to beat. But saying it and then believing it and then ultimately embodying it is the third step. So people can start thinking it and then maybe start saying it, but they rarely get to the embodiment of the luxury of no options, where they do drastic things to make things happen. And, you know, if you fail at that, you're probably still all right because you're going to feel good at that. And you can always, again, like I said, you can always find another, you know, job to financially set yourself up for. But if you really go for it, I don't think that, especially real estate, wholesaling, sales, these things, dedicated enough, you can become a success at these things. So really just putting the obstacles aside, putting everything that you're dealing with aside and going after the luxury of no options. So when I was starting, I had to transition from the music industry out to the real estate industry. And so still needing that income and still getting those calls. So I'm still doing the thing, but my dedication was moving more and more into real estate. And then eventually my activities in real estate were more and more. And I'm like, no, I can't do that session. I just don't like, I probably need the money. So I do the session, but I'd be getting like calls during my session and it was you know, that was the point. And that's the big turning point and a key indicator for when you should be burning the boats is when the old job is being blocked in from the new job. You're getting inbound calls and your business while you're doing the other job. And that might be fine if they're like equal. You're like, okay, I'm making 40 bucks here and 40 bucks there. Fine. It's all kind of the same thing. But the leverage of those real estate calls versus the 40 or $50 I was making per hour in the real estate in the music industry never outpaced it. You can never outpace that income that one of those real estate calls did. So eventually I just kept raising my prices until people stopped calling me and I was able to, if people want to still work with me, there's a price, but my time had become more valuable. And what's interesting and with a lot of the students that I have who've done their first deal and realized the amount of hours it takes to actually generate some of these larger paydays within the system, they're changed in a way that they value their time. So once they realize that their time can be exchanged at that level, they start looking at what they're doing more closely and start getting rid of more options, more focus on the main thing. But if you're if you're going to do the real estate, let's say you're doing a training, it's like 3 months long or 6 months long or 9 months or 12 months or whatever program you decide to take, like for that period, there's no reason why you shouldn't give it 110% of that. Like you might as well get the most out of it while you're in it. Same with the university. If you're going to university, you might as well get the most out of it and give it your best while you're there because that's what you've decided to do. And if that's not what you're feeling, then maybe that's not what you should be doing. Because if it doesn't get you excited to get that 100 and 110%, then maybe it's not really what you want to do. And sometimes you won't know unless you burn the boats. You might not get far enough down that path to the point where you realize that real estate could be something that you're doing. So options, one thing about options and focus that can help you get a little bit closer to the luxury of no options is a lot of top performers realize that there are a limited number of decisions that you can make in a day. So 15, something like 15 or 17 decisions in any given day before you start to get into like decision fatigue, start making bad decisions or poor decisions. So when we wake up, in the morning, what time do you wake up? Well, if you have to make a decision about that every day, that's one. Um, and you can see how quickly you can get all of your decisions eaten up by non-systematized existence. What time are you waking up? Write that down, make that decision one time and just wake up then. What are you having? What are you going to wear? Make that decision and be done with it. You could plan all of your outfits for the entire week with kind of the same energy as one decision that you would make with every day, okay, these pants with that shirt and this thing. So to maintain that focus, to give your, an ultimate energy to the things that you're working on, we actually need to protect our decision making all day long from everything. If you don't have to make a decision, if someone makes a suggestion and that's fine with you, then you should probably, like, oh, do you want the chicken or beef? Even that's a decision. And it's like, how do we offload the maximum amount of decision? It's meal planning, it's setting up. Maybe, there's some entrepreneurs who only wear the same thing all the time. They look like a cartoon character. They're always wearing the same shirt and the same pants. And that's because they've eliminated, Steve Jobs in black all the time, because they've eliminated that decision process that's eating away at those core decisions. So later in the day, 15 hours in or 16 hours in, you probably would say you'd make at least one decision an hour. And when you look at all the decisions stacked up, I don't think you can get through many hours without making two. So 7 hours in, you're out of fatigue. And you look at the workday, it's about 8 hours long. And you can see how after 8 hours of decision making, you're kind of exhausted. So how can we get rid of the options? Let's burn the boats on when we wake up. Let's burn the boats on the majority of what we eat. Let's burn the boats on probably entirely what we decide to wear. And you're going to end up having a lot more decision power later in the day, especially when you get past all of your main core work. You start building your business. You got to save your decision making power for after work when you've got about 5 more important decisions to set up the business to the thing. If you're running and gunning, you don't have enough mental energy after you're done your labor part of your business to grow your business. So let's look at burning the boats wherever we can. Let's adopt the mindset that what we're doing is what we're supposed to be doing and that this is what we're doing. And then embody that with how we, approach whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's sales, marketing, real estate, working the job that you work. Let's approach it with that this is what I decided to do and this is what I'm doing and this is my decision and it's the best one I've ever made. So we're going to run into that brings us to the end of the chapter. We're going to run into deal talk with the people in the room. And we'll see you guys next week on another episode of Larry Buys Houses as we continue to investigate the life-changing book, Money People Deal by my mentor, Stefan Arnio.